At least a few $100 trillion of wealth around the world is stored in real estate because we need to transfer wealth to future generations. And property title was the only way to do it. Where Bitcoin is going in the future, I believe that sets up a Bitcoin market cap of tens of $1 trillion. I modestly project Bitcoin to get to 1 million per coin, which just to introduce readers that might not be, ready for Bitcoin to go from 100K to a million, and they think that they're late. I want to explain to them that no, they're not.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are here today with the one and only Nik Bhatia, a man that wears many hats, founder of the Bitcoin Layer, author of Layered Money and the Bitcoin Age, and Bitcoin Age, and also professor of Bitcoin, teaches Bitcoin at USC. Nik, thank you so much for joining us today.
Frank, great to see you.
Likewise, my friend. Super exciting. You have a new book out, based on at least your tweets. You have toiled over this. You've put a lot of effort into writing this book. I think it's over the last 2 years. So let's actually dive in straight from there. What can readers expect in your second book, Bitcoin Age?
They can expect to read something that is deeply researched. So I spent a lot of time reading in order to craft this story about Bitcoin. I think what Bitcoin is in terms of its software, scarce money, sound money, I think those are well understood concepts. So I wanted to really dive into the origins of them and specifically put juxtapose Bitcoin versus the credit money system and explain to people why both are likely to persist for decades into the future
Okay.
and how they coexist and where Bitcoin fits into all of that.
So the title of it is Bitcoin Age, though. When I read something like that, I get kind of bullish, thinking, okay, Bitcoin is about to take over everything. In your mind, and in the book, how you outline it in the book, how do Bitcoin and the current fiat system, debt-based monies exist?
Yeah, so I think that because Bitcoin presents this once in a lifetime opportunity to have digital scarce money, it has the potential to upend the way that wealth storage works on our planet. And one of the ways that we store wealth as human beings is to do it with land,
Mm.
real estate, buildings, farmland, and accrue rental income. But without the income itself, land is used as that store of value. Now, in the book, I cite land as a $300 trillion asset class, but it could be much higher than that. And at least a few $100 trillion of wealth around the world is stored in real estate because we need, as a species, we need a way to transfer wealth to future generations. And property title is it's up until Bitcoin was it's really the only way to do it. Physical gold is a way to do that. Other sorts of physical possessions that can prove their value in a market can do that. But property title registered through local governments or the state itself with the state's protection of property law, that really underpins the foundation of wealth storage today. And so Bitcoin where Bitcoin is going in the future, I believe that is the place where Bitcoin can go. So that sets up a Bitcoin market cap of tens of $1 trillion. I modestly project Bitcoin to get to 1 million per coin, which is 20 trillion market cap, just to try to introduce readers that might not be, ready for Bitcoin to go from 100K to a million, and they think that they're late. I want to explain to them that no, they're not. So that is the primary example that I use in the book to show people where Bitcoin can go and how it can coexist. And you notice that if Bitcoin, its primary target is real estate as a store of wealth,
Hmm.
that says nothing about the dollar's credit system and its existence into the future.
Understood. So a lot of people, I mean, we talk about Bitcoin as property. So it's also something that Saylor talks about as something that may demonetize property. So as people start maybe saving their wealth more in something more in Bitcoin, let's say, as you're positing, do real estate prices come down? Does property become more affordable? Because right now we have sort of a younger generation that feels like they're totally priced out in the United States. So does Bitcoin not only play this role of storing value, but does it also demonetize the thing that we're currently using to store value in?
It could, and
Okay.
that is a big what if scenario when we're talking about how Bitcoin interacts with the future. So when I think about that, and let me say this about Michael Saylor, people like Mr. Saylor have come up with so many brilliant ways to explain Bitcoin, right? And there and there are people that have come before Saylor, and there will be people that have new metaphors. All of these metaphors are important to explain to people how this thing works.
Yep.
And so with my book, Bitcoin Age, this is a synthesis of my own narratives, narratives I've absorbed, or even direct narratives. For example, Jeff Booth's narrative from Price of Tomorrow and deflation as uh, or technology as a deflationary force on the world.
Yep.
That is featured itself in chapter 2, where I explain that narrative, specifically. So my book is an attempt to give my version of this story with the research that I've done and the stories that I can bring from history and in my own language. So I want to say that about the digital property thing because digital property is one of my themes in this book.
Yep.
And I when you said it, I didn't realize that there's a sailor-esque aspect to it because when I'm writing it, these are just all the narratives that, are flowing through someone who's trying to, create a story. So to
Amazing.
answer your question, though, demonetizing real estate, how much of the property, so let's say it's 300 trillion. So whether it's 100 versus 200 or 250 versus 50, I don't know the ratio,
Yep.
but there's some ratio in there which the property that is held in property, the value of that property is the price that you might get in the market, and therefore it's worth it to own that property for those landowners. Then there's the other set of which it's just a wealth storage and vehicle, and you're driving up prices because there's no other way to protect against the credit system.
Yep.
And that's really why people hold real estate to transfer wealth into the future is because you can't do it with currency. You cannot do it with currency. You cannot do it with fixed income. You can do it with equity.
Right, I was going to say, so I wanted to play devil's advocate for a moment since I guess maybe the advent of the S&P 500 in what, the mid 90s or so, people look at that as their way of storing wealth. So in your mind, how does then the S&P 500 compare to Bitcoin?
Equity is a complement to Bitcoin.
Okay.
What I state in the book is that Bitcoin is a savings technology. That's one that I took directly from Pierre Richard. I pinged him during the writing of the book. I said, "Hey, Pierre," I didn't even really ask. I told him, "Hey, I'm using you in your name. Savings technology. How do you want me to describe you in the book?" And so anyway, Bitcoin, the savings technology is not it does nothing to do with owning productive processes.
Right. Okay.
If you own a factory, you own capital. You are right, you have the not right, you have the ability to generate cash flow denominated in whatever currency you want because if you're delivering goods, you can demand payment in anything.
Right.
Bitcoin, currency, commodities, whatever you want, you can demand payment. So, a capital owner, therefore an equity owner, and a Bitcoin owner are complementing each other. Therefore, Bitcoin and equity is a those are a that's a pair. That's a duo.
Yeah.
That's not an exclusive relationship. It actually is the perfect way to go. Bitcoin is the perfect way to go between production and savings.
Actually,
And
my
I, oh yeah, I outline that in the book.
Appreciate that. That's brilliant. I had not thought about it like that. But going back to real estate for just a moment, I had thought about, okay, well, if you buy a rental property, what if the person who's renting from you pays you in Bitcoin? Isn't that the best of both worlds as well? In your mind, what is that comparable to the scenario that you just sort of the picture you just painted with equities as well?
So that's production. If you own a rental property, you're owning something that can produce. So what you are owning is a building that can house people. That is a service that you are providing.
Right.
And so that is equity. So when you own real estate outright, from a balance sheet perspective, let's say you have no debt, the asset is the house. The other side of the balance sheet means it's 100% equity. That's what equity means. It means
Got
the ownership.
got it.
And so when you own real estate to be in the productive process, you are owning equity. Those are, again, complements. Now, is real estate used for production and equity across every bit of that 300 trillion? I would argue no.
Okay.
And so that is where a lot of it can come out of real estate because it's highly monetized today, as are equities. So I believe that in the book I have a sentence at least that explains that some of the stock market is held as a wealth storage mechanism,
Yep.
right? And so some of real estate is held as a wealth storage mechanism. Bitcoin can take from both of those, even though they both are productive processes. So Bitcoin as this permanent money. That is I talk about currency as temporary money.
Yep.
It's money because it circulates, right? People accept it. So it's definitely money, but it's definitely temporary. And Bitcoin offers a permanent money, much like gold. The digital gold analogy, I tried not to lean on it, but explained that Bitcoin is this permanent type of money and can therefore replace some of the capital that's dedicated to, by capital, I mean funds,
Right.
some of those funds that are dedicated to stocks or real estate as a wealth storage mechanism that can come out of it. But owning companies, owning factories is much more productive, has much more production capacity than owning than the average property,
Right.
right? The way that people can collect rental income with it. So there's, of course, nuances to both of the equity and the real estate side in terms of what Bitcoin can take away from.
Yep.
But I also talk about cash as $100 trillion asset as a target for Bitcoin,
Mhm.
for sure. And then by association, fixed income, because fixed income is just a promise to pay currency.
Appreciate all that. Super, super helpful. Some definitely some new framing, even for me, someone who studies this stuff quite for spends most of my days studying this. Another thing in the Bitcoin age that we're moving into, um, does Bitcoin become the denominator in more people's minds? Meaning, does it become what we start pricing things in, even if it isn't maybe the official denominator of that country? And this, again, I think is another sort of Jeff Booth sort of idea that right now, Bitcoin is repricing everything. Mark Moss talks about this a lot. Do you touch on that in the book?
I don't talk about the redenomination of things in Bitcoin.
Mm.
However, I do present to people that if they value their time in Bitcoin, then that's how they get ahead. That is the empowering thing. So It is the same message, Frank. There's no doubt about it. I talk about denominating your time in Bitcoin. It's your labor. It's your precious resource. I hit that in chapter 1 right at the beginning. That if you are going to earn, that is your precious time. And if you are trading it for credits, you are doing yourself a disservice. It eats away. And so think about it denominated in Bitcoin. So I use the Bitcoin symbol as the denomination just alongside the dollar symbol
Okay.
in the book to show people to think in Bitcoin terms. However, as a broad theme, I don't project that you will walk into um, a store and the price will be in Bitcoin there, or that your company will be paying you in Bitcoin. I do present that if companies pay their future employees in Bitcoin, that could attract people to work for that company.
Mm.
It's gently introduced, but I actually myself don't think that. Um, I think the dollar is a very strong network,
Yes, right.
and so to see prices across the globe change from dollars to Bitcoin, I think would take a really long time.
Okay.
The one thing I always think about, and I have for years, is going through international airports and going through a duty free shop, and what price is going to be on the items in the duty free shop. I do see one day Bitcoin as, maybe a digital screen with the Bitcoin price and the dollar price,
Yeah.
maybe next to each other. One day, like in my mind's eye, I see that.
Okay.
However, I didn't write that in this book because that wasn't the purpose of this book. It wasn't to step 50 years into a sci-fi future or even 20 years into a sci-fi future and say, what does it look like? That's I actually say that the Bitcoin age begins in 2016 when CME futures became inevitable. And
Interesting.
the CME, the CFTC rulings, it was just clear as day to me when once Chicago was involved in the settlement of Bitcoin and the CME. For me, that was the moment.
Okay.
So the Bitcoin age for me commenced in 2016. I make that claim specifically in the book, and now we're living in one. We're living in a Bitcoin age where people can empower themselves with this savings technology. It's a narrative that people are familiar with, but why should they read it? If you want to journey through 19 the creature from Jekyll Island and how the Fed was formed,
Yep.
how the internet was formed at the Defense Department in the 50s and the 60s, how cryptography broke free of the NSA between the 70s and 80s, and some in-depth Satoshi and Hal Finney narration of Bitcoin's birth.
Yep.
This book could be for you. It has I read a lot of books to synthesize a lot of information, capture hopefully for people an engaging story that isn't just a bland vanilla walkthrough of chronology, but it really combines a story of banking, the dollar, the internet, cryptography, the NSA, and the crypto war. A lot of the heroes and originators of Bitcoin before Satoshi Nakamoto was even a thing. So I do hope people will check it out.
Yeah, it's literally the next book on my list. And full disclosure, I have not read it yet, but I did read your first book, and it was it was one of the first books I read about Bitcoin. And what comes to mind when I think of your work is like a really deep thoughtfulness. And in the Bitcoin space, I think your voice is very, very necessary because oftentimes we could focus on being, more of a Twitter personality. We could focus being a bit more academic, and then we could sort of. I think you have found this really nice balance of you do some teaching at the academic level, which we'll get into, but you also have this amazing experience working with bonds. So I don't know if it's calling you a former bond trader. Is that the
Yes, that's
fair way to put
correct.
it? Yeah. So you have this amazing sort of all these different experiences that you're pulling from, and you also wear many hats currently. So to get to that point, I'm wondering. So I know that layered money was largely inspired by what you had done as a bond trader. What was it that inspired this book? What about your more recent experience inspired you to write to write the Bitcoin to write Bitcoin Age?
It's a great question, Frank. I wrote layered money. Well, I worked on a bond desk for a large asset manager. I was trading US Treasuries and I started as a cash trader, which means trading repo and T-bills and cash accounts. People that need money in 15 minutes,
Okay.
Frank. Those types of people.
Sure.
And not just a couple $1,000. I need $500 million in 3 hours from my account.
Yep.
So you not only have to be able to raise the money for them by selling the securities in the market, but you have to own the right securities in the first place, knowing that your client can ask for the money tomorrow.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was my job to start. That's how I got started in the business. And then I ended up trading the whole curve for the firm. Um, as I got more experience and got more opportunities to move up.
Okay.
Once I once I became the head of the Treasury's trading desk, the next level up from that is starting to run the decisions and the strategy. So as the head Treasury's cash trader across the curve, my opinion matters only so much, right? I'm there to trade. It's a big shop, so the trader is not the decision maker.
Mm.
They're the trader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, do you think, Frank, that I was shy or expressive in my opinion on where rates are going at the time? I mean,
I have to say, personality wise, I can't imagine you in this sphere, to be honest, because you're such a mild mannered. You remind me a lot of like the Jeff Booths of this space, just very down to earth, mild mannered, all this stuff. But I'm assuming in that sort of situation, what comes to mind, someone once told me like if you took Mother Teresa and put her in like a New York taxi cab, she would become aggressive very quickly. I would imagine it's similar when you're in an environment like that. Yeah.
yeah, the desk was the is the most fun anybody can ever have.
Oh, you like? Okay, interesting.
Frank, you asked about layered money. The question, I promise I'm gonna get there and where
Okay.
even
Yeah. Yeah.
Bitcoin, but this is what matters.
Okay.
Like where I come from.
Yep. Yep.
Right? And what do I love? How did I end up on a bond desk? Because I wanted to be there.
Okay.
I wanted to be in it. And so you fast forward to head of the desk and uh, head of the treasuries part of the desk,
Yeah.
I should say, right? I'm sitting next to the head of rate strategy right across from me. So his job to tell me what to trade.
Yep.
There's the head of the trading desk itself, who's the head of the rates guy who's above me. He's the head of the credit guy. He's the head of the structure. He is the head of the structured team
Okay.
himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at that point, I'm looking at the rest of my career and I'm saying I'm either going to be having trades on the line. I have to move. I either have to try to compete with the current person for his job, or I have to go on to the next job and try to step into a managerial role where you're actually making the decisions. You're doing the strategy. So going from the desk to strategy and being involved in my own trades, like having my own trades during my time on the desk, it's and I even managed accounts before I got to the desk. So I had the experience of being a fiduciary
Okay.
through and through. I searched my soul. You can't sleep at night when you have a position open. I couldn't sleep when I had positions open.
Interesting.
I was rolling over and checking the Bloomberg app. That was not for me.
Right.
For the long term. I said, that is not for me. And so while I was there on the desk, I fell in love with writing my notes to the desk, where
Interesting.
like these chart updates, and it all comes from my time on the desk, trying to explain to people where the rates are going.
Mm.
Hey, rates are going down, and trying to explain to people why that was happening during 2018, 2019. So it wasn't for me, and I got the opportunity to teach at USC. toward the end, I had already written the time value of Bitcoin,
Yep.
and the writing was on the wall that it was a Bitcoin future for me. The Bitcoin age had started, and in my bones, I knew it. And so we took a huge leap as a family. I've told this story, and then battled through the writing of Layered Money. But the writing Layered Money was because I started at USC and said, hey, this curriculum that I've inherited from the previous professor is not it for me. I'm teaching fixed income. I want to teach money also.
Yep.
So I redid the curriculum. I built the readings, and in my process of reading what I wanted to teach my students, I discovered the perfect narrative for Bitcoin, Layered Money,
Yep.
by reading The Inherent Hierarchy of Money by Professor Perry Merling, you
Mm.
know, and that's the origin of Layered Money. That is where the book came from. It is my attempt to explain Bitcoin and money from an academic framework through all my experience. Because when I read that paper, read it, 2 or 3 times in the first, couple days, I kn- I knew that it had synthesized everything that I had been working on and researching myself.
Okay.
I wasn't an academic. I wasn't an academic yet at that point. I
Mhm.
was just a practitioner. So I had just read regular books, just building my own understanding and talking to people as a practitioner and just understanding how all of this stuff works. Then I layered on the academic framework, wrote Layered Money, wrote it for the students, wrote it for the people. Here is how you understand Bitcoin from the academic side. Now it's, I mean, I think that's why people liked it, because it's just undeniable. It's actually accounting.
Yep.
It's just accounting. And so why did I need to write Bitcoin Age? Because I needed my own Bitcoin story,
Okay.
not an accounting story about money to show you why Bitcoin. Maybe Layered Money is that book that will last in this way because it is so simple. It is the simple explanation that you need.
Yep.
I also wanted to write the Bitcoin story through my lens.
Yep.
This is just my story about Bitcoin. Why Bitcoin? Where did it come from? Where the hell did this thing come from?
It's good. Yeah.
Uh, you know, I have many people that I come across, students, and they have no idea what Bitcoin is. We live in this huge bubble where everybody understands so much about Bitcoin,
Yeah.
but broadly, people have no
No idea.
idea what it is.
Yep.
So I want to tell the whole thing from my perspective. You have to tell this creature of Jekyll Island. You have to tell the history of the internet. Where did it come from?
Yep.
And all of it. I had a blast writing it, and I definitely like, as Layered Money was my life's work. This is also. There's no way that it's not.
Mhm. Super inspiring. Truly amazing stuff. Never written a book. Obviously, maybe a little intimidated now after hearing how much you sort of put into this, but super inspiring nonetheless. I'm also kind of curious to hear if maybe that your experience teaching helped you to maybe distill information in a different way. And I'll say that again in that you just mentioned some people we're in this Bitcoin bubble where we all have a pretty firm grasp on what it is. We're all constantly learning, but we have a good footing for what it is. Um, Teaching is a really good way. You say something to a room full of people. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't get it. Sometimes certain people interpret what you're saying in one way, and you see that when you get feedback from the students. For those, yeah, I was a college lecturer for 7 years, so I have some experience doing this. But I'm wondering how much that process of teaching over these last few years has helped you to present and distill information differently, and if that affected the way that you wrote Bitcoin Age.
It's everything.
Okay. Okay.
Because without being a teacher, then you can still be a teacher, but probably going to be more iterative because you have to write, then the readers have to reach back out to you,
Yes.
and then you understand what you didn't explain well, or you just workshop it a lot and you're, you know, engaging with the students. But teaching is everything.
Uh,
because you have 30 lectures to make your case
yep.
for what you want to teach them. So you have to figure out, what do I want to teach them? What do they have to read?
Yep.
And then how do you teach? How do you string it together? How do you build it up? How do you teach it across a whole semester?
Yep.
You have 30 you drive to campus 30 times. That's it. And you get 30 chances to build it. And
Yep.
if you go too long, you don't get to I mean, I've done it. Now I've taught uh over a dozen classes. Like
Okay.
I've been at USC for since 2019. So
Okay.
I've taught
Yep.
um you know most of the semesters. I've taught a couple times per semester anyway. So I've done it at least a dozen times now, and before you know it, it'll be 20 and 30, and I'll have just done this in terms of taking a course from front to back over and over again,
Yep.
and I'm building my third one right now. I've done a obviously fixed income. I have a Bitcoin class, and then I have a new Bitcoin summer class that it's a new class that I'm designing from scratch.
Cool.
You have to plan it out. And so that's what a book is too.
Yes.
You have to
Right.
plan the whole story out, all the stuff that and you can't make them go read. That would defeat the purpose. Like, pause the book and go read this other book.
Yeah.
No,
Right. 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 Yep.
you can't do that with the book, and like you can with your students over 4 months
Yep.
and 30 lectures where they get to go home and you have time and all that. You have to do it all in the book. So I only wrote Layered Money after I had been a professor for two twice
Okay. Oh,
at that
interesting.
point,
Two
right?
courses. You.
Because the fall of September 2019, the spring of 2020, which was the COVID semester where they sent all of us home,
Yep.
was my second semester. And once they sent all of us home, I was like, time to write the book.
Wow. Super, super interesting. In the broader academic space, as the Overton window around Bitcoin is shifting now, is it easier to maybe have conversations with your colleagues about what you teach? Because so I left academia in 2021. If I brought up Bitcoin in a meeting, now granted, I was a writing teacher. If I brought up Bitcoin in a meeting, though, people would have looked at me cross-eyed or just thought I was insane or wondering why I was on a university campus at all. Is that starting to change? Do people now look at Bitcoin more the way you do as just a macroeconomic asset versus some taboo subject, something that only drug dealers and criminals use? Is that shifting? And has the current administration played any sort of role in that?
So I have an interesting way to answer this question. I am an adjunct professor at USC Marshall School of Business. I drive to campus, I teach, and I drive
Go
home
home.
to have dinner with my family. I teach in the evenings. I'm not there on campus to hang out with people. I am there for my students. I put every ounce I have into the 80 minutes. I hit the buzzer and I tell everyone to have a fantastic evening, like right at the buzzer, because I'm trying to teach everything I can. I, have tweeted a couple pictures in the last couple days from the board. If people want to go check those out, like what it looks like in my classroom,
Yeah,
it's just T charts.
nice.
It's just T charts and arrows. That's how we do it because it's the money portion that I teach. Obviously, I teach bond math before money, and then I teach bond math and derivatives math after the money portion. But the middle portion of my course is money, and I love teaching that, and it's just all T charts. So, you know, when I'm to answer your question, my duty is to my students and the university, which I love being at USC because they give me the freedom to teach. They do not tell me what to teach. They do not
Sure.
audit my classes. Everything is recorded. They can come in. At the beginning, they did, right? They sent somebody in and she sent me an email. She's like, great job. Like, keep it up. And
Nice.
you engage with the students and, but every student reviews me. I see the numbers, I see the comments, I don't see their names.
Yep.
So I'm sure they read what the students say. They talk. My fixed income class is full now.
Yep.
And I asked them 2 years ago, hey, how come it went from like 20 something to like 50? And they said, now people tell the next class to take your class because it's an elective, it's not core.
Okay.
So you understand that I I have a freedom that I can't put a price on
Okay.
because I just get to teach. They say teach fixed income. I teach the shit out of fixed
Love
income.
it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I wrote Layered Money. The dean read my book because one of the professors, her husband read my book. He's a Bitcoiner.
Yeah. Okay.
She passed it to the dean. He read the book. They pinged me. He said, do a class. We got the Van Eck Digital Assets Initiative.
Okay.
Do a class. So I did a class, and it was and I said it's going to be called Bitcoin and digital assets.
Okay.
And they said they sent it to the curriculum committee. Curriculum committee came back and said maybe you should call it cryptocurrency because we don't know. And I said no. The course is called Bitcoin because if you look at the syllabus, the readings are about Bitcoin.
Right.
And that's what we're going to teach here. I said there's an and digital assets part because we can talk about Tether and its importance and why other things have come about.
Right.
And then they said okay.
Amazing. Yeah.
And so you see what the process is and what I'm doing there. I'm just I always believe it. You vote with your dollars. I'm a big proponent of that. And you put your money where your mouth is. You lead by example. And so I'm leading by example. They offered me a Bitcoin class.
Yep.
I didn't go to them and say, hey, you guys should be teaching Bitcoin.
Yep.
And guess what? This current semester, I'm not teaching that Bitcoin class because of some bureaucracy in the school. They, have to process, like you only get to teach if it's a non-numbered class, a certain amount of times. I ran up
Okay.
against that. We didn't get the class submitted for in the right way to teach it this. So, and then they offered me a summer class to teach Bitcoin.
Mm.
And it's a new class, not for the undergrads. I've sent this out. It's a summer program. And g- you know, they're not going to tell me I'm designing the curriculum. I'm having a blast doing it. They don't tell me what to teach.
Syllabus.
They don't do tell me anything.
Yeah.
And so what kind of blessing is that?
Can I
So
contextualize?
I can't even answer your question, Frank. Like, how do you engage with your colleagues? That's not even the right way to frame it.
Got
It's like, are you leading by example? Yes, I'm leading by
it.
example.
I love that. I want to just frame and contextualize some of what you're saying. So, when you hold, so given that you're working as an adjunct, which I did as well, and I've also had full time positions, I was much less happy during my full time positions because you have to go to meetings that are very boring. You have to do other things that are not as fun as the actual engaging with the students. Just want to contextualize that for those listening. What Nick is saying is that he gets to do the best part of the job and to not necessarily have to worry about the other part of the job, a lot of which is revolves around speaking with colleagues and all of this other stuff that might lead to conversations around Bitcoin misunderstanding, Bitcoin, whatever. He doesn't have to deal with any of that. So I think that that's actually really, really cool. One of the other things that came to mind while you were speaking there is I always tell people if you really want to learn things, there are two things you should probably do: teach the thing you want to learn, attempt to teach the thing you want to learn, and then write about the thing you want to learn. And you do both. So I'm wondering, over the last 2 years working on this book and the last, however, 5 years teaching, 6 years teaching, what have been some aha moments for you in the process as you're teaching these things, as you're researching? What has sort of hit you and said like, wow, that's a revelation. I have to include that or I have to teach that.
Uh, both of them are actually in the designs of the curriculum because you have to think it out
Okay.
at the beginning.
Yep.
So to design it from the beginning, you have to have the readings on the syllabus from the beginning.
Right.
And
Right.
you have to have the map of the course from the beginning. Even if you have a soft pivot, middle of the semester. For example, this semester I'm teaching my liquidity index for the first time.
Okay.
And so I bumped that lecture to the end of the semester because I still have to work on it.
Okay.
And teaching derivatives math a little bit earlier in the semester. So just for example, and to bring back the university just for a second,
Yep.
because they give me this freedom, and I'm also a Trojan, right? And I'm a third generation Trojan myself. I want to do right by the university so much.
Okay.
And so basically whatever they need from me, I'm going to make my best effort to do that
Understood.
because it is a blessing to have this opportunity. So I really do right by the university in addition to my duty to the students and to teach, but also as an entrepreneur, after a couple years of teaching, I was like, I want to teach the world as well. So started the Bitcoin layer, started writing, and started doing videos. So Frank, you're gonna have to remind me what your
Yeah, I was saying
question
what
was.
have been your aha moments along the way. What I was saying was what I usually recommend to people is if you want to understand it, try to teach this thing or write about it, and very quickly you'll see the gaps in your knowledge, or you'll stumble upon new things that you were not aware of, and those are really fun aha moments. I was just wondering if any of those moments came to mind for you.
The inherent hierarchy of money. So reading that paper,
Okay.
right? Because that was in the design of the curriculum for
Okay.
the second time I was teaching,
Yep.
and the and then for Bitcoin, because that was the origin of layered money. So, if people want to see that aha moment happen, you can read layered money and come away with my first one, which was like, wow, Bitcoin is first layer money. This is crazy important.
Yeah. Yep.
Crazy important. Have to write this book.
Okay.
So that was aha moment number one. The aha moment in the second book was the design of the Bitcoin curriculum for my Bitcoin class, which now, if I'm trying to remember which year that was,
2020 or 2021, maybe.
no, the book was published in 2021,
Right.
so it couldn't have been before 2022.
Got it.
Um, I'll have to see
No
when my first
worries.
semester for the Bitcoin class was.
Yep.
But when I was designing that curriculum, I had to do the Satoshi research.
In terms of who Satoshi might have been.
Not the who, but read all the emails.
Wow.
Read all the emails. Everything that and then everything that Hal wrote, and then also, comparing the Atom back and the all of that stuff before. So all the forums, all the emails, everything, shout out to Satoshi Nakamoto Institute
Yep.
and the incredible resource that they have. And they provide you the link you can click through and then just go to the forums themselves and have the primary source. I'm a primary source type of person. And reading everything, uh, then you really see what they invented.
That's amazing.
Th-
Yep.
What was invented was something that was truly a once in it's hard to measure. Like, I still can't measure the time frame. Like, what is Bitcoin the most important invention since, or how do you compare it to other ones in the past?
Yep.
But it it has to be several hundred years because of it's probably the double entry accounting.
Yeah, right. Which is what,
It's for
1400s or so. Yeah.
1400s,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Which I did write about in Layered Money.
Hmm. Yep.
And so seeing it seeing them seeing them realize that it had happened because I came to Bitcoin in 2016. So it had been alive for 7 years, and then I took a year to understand what it was, and then I, started to write about it, and but all of that reading, all of that stuff only happened after I left the desk, and then actually I had known the summary of it already,
Okay.
right? So, but seeing it for yourself, it's different, and then you have the power to tell the story and the confidence to say, yes, uh this is a technology that is changing humanity.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I recommend that oftentimes when people in this space, sometimes we get sort of periphery information about, let's say, Austrian economics or something. One of the best practices that I've gone through in the last few years is reading a lot of the seminal texts in that field, Human Action by Ludwig von Mises and The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek. And I really recommend to people out there, oftentimes there are memes that circulate around this stuff, or we read summaries of this stuff or somebody else's take. But when you go back and read primary sources, that's when you start to really develop a sort of authority and a feeling of like, okay, I went right to the source of where this came from. Now I have the ability to synthesize it through my own lens, my own experience. And I think that's the really special thing that you do, especially given that your experiences are so varied. One of the things I want to ask you as well, especially as a teacher, you're constantly getting feedback from people, but I'm sure that as an author, that's the case as well. Um, when we put things out there as a teacher or an author, we have maybe our intentions for the point we're trying to get across, but then people sort of receive what they receive, interpret it how they will interpret it. What are some surprising things that you feel like people have learned from both your work as a teacher and an author?
It's true. I am realizing right now that the students don't understand shadow money. Shout out to my current students. I'm teaching shadow money for the second time this year. I taught it for the first time last semester, so I thought I could teach it better this semester, and it's very tough. So, you can't just teach something and assume that people will learn it, especially tough concepts.
Yes, agree. Now,
So,
can I just specify so
yep,
that we're on the same page? Shadow money, we're talking about like the euro dollar, something like that?
the euro dollar and repo
Okay,
and
got it.
money market fund shares,
Got it. Okay,
those three things together.
cool.
I wish I could teach foreign exchange swaps, FX swaps, as shadow money because they are, but I don't have. I'm trying.
Okay.
And I tried to teach it a little bit last semester, and I skipped over it this one because they weren't even. It's tough. Repo is tough.
Yep.
Like really understanding repo is tough,
Yep.
and the euro dollar is actually easier than repo
Okay.
to teach
Interesting.
uh, because it's a deposit, so people still understand that.
Okay.
Um, your question was about
What has surprised
discovering things that surprised me about teaching. Yeah, so this is actually very relevant to Bitcoin, which is that I teach how how the saying goes, how does a bill become a law? If you want to understand civics, you have to explain how a bill becomes a law
you?
and travel through the branches of government. Well, how does a transaction get into a block in
Love it.
Bitcoin?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The students have to know it, and they have to be able to describe it very, very intricately,
Okay.
including block confirmation, the whole process of block confirmation, and how a miner discovers or generates, in Satoshi's word, generates a valid block
Yep.
and adds it to the blockchain, the chain of blocks. And, from everything from the mempool to the blockchain. And I think I have to spend about 5 hours of lecture time on it.
Wow. Okay.
So over 3 to 4 lectures.
Okay.
So driving to campus 3 times and getting in front of everyone and teaching, teaching. And these are students that they don't know the first thing about anything.
Okay.
And I'm not a cryptographer, right? I'm a financial practitioner.
Right.
I'm a bond trader
Right.
and fixed income researcher.
Yep.
Now, so what was surprising is that I can teach it and they can get it. They can explain every part of it clearly. It's like the opposite of what I'm experiencing with repo and shadow money. It
Okay.
pulled somebody out of the line and it would be really tough. So I can't even put much of it on the final, you understand? But in the Bitcoin final, I have very specific questions like what happens at this point in the process of when when the difficulty target, or let's say, if blocks are coming every 8 minutes, the difficulty target will do blank, and uh, the level of difficulty will do this, and
Mm.
they have multiple choice, and they have to understand everything about how the 21 million coins come into existence and have come into existence. And so to answer your question, it it was awesome to experience that the I can teach it and they get it and they
Yes.
tested well on it.
Yeah.
My midterm is just about how the blockchain works.
Yep.
And the students got many of them got 20 out of 20, 19 out of 20. Phenomenal stuff. It's not an easy test.
Yeah.
If you don't get it, you flunk it.
Yeah.
If you haven't come to class, you're not going to get it. And just it's amazing. It means that it's teachable, and the fact that it's teachable it means that this whole idea that it's digital property, it's digital gold, it's digital real estate, it's an idea that billions can get behind,
Yeah.
and we're already on the way. I think the market price tells us that.
Yeah. Wow. Super fascinating. I love it. As a last question, just thinking about audience. So when you talk about teaching these students, you're saying that a lot of them come to this with no understanding of what Bitcoin is. I'm imagining some of your readers for Layered Money and Bitcoin Age are people who have an understanding. They want to learn more though. So in terms of let's say your students first, are they walking away from the class and invested in Bitcoin? Do they have some Bitcoin? Are they excited about Bitcoin, or what tends to be the reaction versus what sorts of responses do you tend to get to your books when people read them?
Yeah, I think I like to say that it's a sample size of the world. So
Okay.
you're gonna get the same percentage of students that are into it after, and several walk away, and you never hear from them again.
Mm.
Maybe they got into it, maybe they didn't,
Okay.
maybe it didn't register. So I think it's no different. How many Bitcoin owners are there in the world today? How many of those people really understand what they have and why? How many don't? How many does it even matter how much they understand if they believe in it
Right.
from their perspective, if they feel empowered? All of those questions I don't know the answer to.
Fair.
But what I can tell you is that every semester I have students that stay in touch. They loved the class. They want to keep me updated on their career.
Cool.
They want to check in. I got the most incredible email from a student a couple weeks ago. He took the first or second version of my Bitcoin class, and he said that it changed his whole approach to a lot of things,
Cool.
and yeah, it was a special. So that will always happen, and that's all you need, Frank.
Keeps you going.
You only need to get the validation
Yep.
from one person, because you know that there's maybe one other person that didn't reach out, and then that it just makes it worth it. So
Yep.
I love what I do, and I'm thankful to teach in the limited capacity I do, because it allows me to pursue my own interests.
Amazing. So we do have to wrap it up there, but I want to sort of that energy with which Nick has just expressed his love for teaching, it's also prevalent in his books. Like as I said, having read Layered Money, I felt it. There's detail, there's a real sort of desire for the audience to understand what he's trying to present. There's a lot of thought that's not only gone into the researching, but distilling the information in a way that's, you know, palatable, digestible, all of that stuff. So, on that note, Nick, where can people go to buy the Bitcoin Age? Best platforms, and then also where can they find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. People can go to Amazon to buy Bitcoin Age, and they can go to thebitcoinlayer.com for all the information about everything that we're doing, including the books and our media and our pro subscription. So thebitcoinlayer.com, you can find everything, including link to the book on Amazon. It's on there. I'm proud of the team. Everyone's doing such a great job at the Bitcoin Layer. I'm really lucky to have such a great team working alongside me. We're just we're all working together to produce a lot of amazing content for people. And that's where people can find me. You can find me also on Twitter, but please just go buy the book. The audiobook will be out soon.
Awesome.
I'm excited for that. So it's in post production, and that will also be on the bitcoinlayer.com that people can find that.
Amazing. And I apologize. We didn't dive too far into the bitcoinlayer.com. I did genuinely sort of appreciate not only what you were saying about your work, especially as a teacher, but the look on your face. You seem to deeply, deeply appreciate the fact that you've been given this opportunity to do this work. And forgive me for wanting to dive in a little bit deeper there and probe that. So thank you so much for being so candid, for being so open and honest. Thank you for what you do in this space, being such a prominent and important voice. Thank you for what you do as an author, a teacher. You're an absolute gem here. It's an honor to speak with you, Nick, and we really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Frank. You're doing a great job, man. Congrats on all that you're doing. I can see you working really hard traveling around, so keep it up.
Thank you. We'll do my best. All right, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Take it easy.